Hollywood's golden age sold us the idea that glamorous stars always married glamorous partners. People imagined movie idols walking into rooms filled with beauty queens and choosing from the most perfect faces on earth. But what the public never understood was that many of the biggest stars, actors who could make millions swoon with just one look, chose spouses who didn't fit the Hollywood mold at all. Take Humphrey Bogart. By the time he met Mayo Methot, Bogart was already one of the coolest men alive. The studio wanted to parade him around with elegant beauties, but he chose Mayo, a woman who looked much older than him and carried a hard, stern face. She wasn't glamorous, she wasn't soft, she certainly wasn't camera-ready. Fans said she looked like a tired schoolteacher who'd spent her life shouting at children. What they didn't know was that Bogart actually fell for her intensity. Mayo wasn't intimidated by him. She barked back. She challenged him. And he liked that, until it turned into chaos. Their marriage became a war zone. Mayo became nicknamed Sluggy because she had a habit of swinging first, especially when she suspected other women were looking at Bogart. And in Hollywood, everyone was looking. So while people called her unattractive or even witch-like, Bogart stayed with her far longer than anyone expected. Only when she burned his career and reputation with repeated public scenes did he walk away. Later, when he married Lauren Bacall, the glamorous dream, people thought he'd finally fixed his image. But the real reason he left Mayo wasn't her looks. It was because Mayo made him feel small, and Bogart couldn't handle anyone who threatened his legend. Then there was Mickey Rooney. At the height of his fame, Rooney was the biggest box office draw in the world. His co-stars were starlets. His dating pool was basically all of MGM. But Mickey didn't just go for glamour. He had a habit of marrying women who looked painfully ordinary, sometimes even mismatched to the point that the press assumed they were secret relatives. His first wife, Ava Gardner, was godlike, and Mickey couldn't handle it. He panicked. He wanted control. So after Ava left, he intentionally swung the other way. He chose partners who wouldn't overshadow him, women who looked plain, even dowdy. Fans joked that Mickey found his brides at bus stops. But that was exactly the point. He wanted women who didn't compete with him, didn't challenge him, and most importantly, didn't make him feel like a boy trapped in the body of a Hollywood giant. Off camera, Mickey was insecure and terrified of anyone who looked perfect. So while the press mocked his wives, calling some of them homely or housekeeper material, Mickey felt safe with them. Until, of course, he didn't. His insecurity eventually destroyed every marriage he ever had. One of the most shocking examples was Ernest Borgnine. He was already a powerhouse actor when he settled into a marriage that made the tabloids gasp. People said she looked like she was built out of angles and elbows, like a woman sculpted from the leftover parts of life. She wasn't glamorous, her features were sharp, and she looked perpetually annoyed. Hollywood thought it was a joke. But Borgnine didn't care. Unlike MGM pretty boys, he had grown up rough and undervalued. Beauty wasn't currency to him. He chose someone who reminded him of the real world, someone who didn't rely on cosmetic fantasy. But when Borgnine became famous, she couldn't handle becoming Mrs. Ernest Borgnine. The pressure hit, she became paranoid, and she began to lash out. People around the couple said she acted like she had to constantly prove she deserved to be there. Borgnine later admitted that the marriage was like living with a live wire that never shut off. And the more she spiraled, the more Hollywood laughed at her appearance. Borgnine, a war veteran, could handle battlefield chaos. He just couldn't handle a wife who lived every day like an emotional grenade. Then there was Fred Allen, one of radio's biggest comedic stars. His wife, Portland Hoffa, was known as one of the most awkward-looking women on radio. Yes, even radio had beauty standards. Portland spoke with a squeaky voice, carried herself like a quirky aunt, and had a face that critics said looked like it came from a political cartoon. But Fred adored her. He didn't want a trophy. He wanted someone who made him laugh when the lights were off. They stayed together until his death, and even when the press attacked her looks, Fred defended her publicly without hesitation. Hollywood was confused because Allen was one of the sharpest minds in entertainment. Surely he could do better? But Allen didn't want better. He wanted the one person who made him feel human. When he died, she never remarried. The same couldn't be said for Jerry Lewis. Fans expected Jerry to marry a glamorous bombshell, someone who matched his stage charisma. Instead, his wife Patty was described as plain, domestic, even matronly. Jealous fans called her the girl next door who grew up into a PTA mom. She wasn't fashionable. She didn't sparkle. But she quietly held Lewis's empire together from behind the curtain for decades. And people who worked with Lewis said something surprising. Jerry respected her because she didn't fall for his jokes. She treated him like a man, not a brand. And that terrified him. When Jerry cheated repeatedly, Patty didn't crumble. She stayed, she weathered it, and Hollywood began to whisper that she was too boring to even fight back. But that supposed dullness was actually her armor. It made her immune to the chaos he created. In the end, it was Jerry, not Patty, who imploded the marriage. But the most unexpected example was Clark Gable. The man who played Rhett Butler, the walking symbol of powerful masculinity, had a romantic history that baffled his fans. He didn't just fall for Carole Lombard's humor. He liked women who softened him, women who looked real, even when the public screamed that they were too old, too plain, or too uninteresting. Gable cared more about temperament than symmetry. And when Lombard died, he spiraled into marriages with women who looked nothing like Hollywood royalty. People whispered that he picked women who couldn't overshadow the ghost of Carole. But the real truth was uglier. After losing her, Gable lost the part of himself that understood beauty. You see the pattern. These stars weren't idiots, they weren't blind, and they didn't have bad taste. They were running from the pressure of perfection. They chose partners who didn't compete with their image, who didn't remind them of how temporary fame was. Sometimes they wanted emotional safety. Sometimes they wanted someone to control. And sometimes they simply wanted to feel like the big one in the room. The world mocked these wives as ugly, unworthy, or out of their league. But the irony is that most of the stars who chose glamorous partners ended in divorce, scandal, bankruptcy, or misery. The ones who chose the unbeautiful often had the most stable years of their life, until fame tore it apart anyway.